After a Qatar race filled with pit stops and overtakes, which Max Verstappen was once again the winner of, F1 is returning to the United States for the second of 3 races in the US, which means that it's time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix. Now let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. As mentioned, this is the second of 3 races in the United States for 2023, and going into this weekend, Max Verstappen has been officially crowned World Drivers' Champion. The Circuit of the Americas in Texas is one of my personal favourite races of the year, typically because it produces good to great racers. The circuit features a lot of elevation changes and some fast flowing corners, especially at the beginning of the lap. This is followed by some tighter corners towards the end of the lap, and the tyres take an absolute beating around this circuit. But thankfully, the structure of the tyre is not likely to be an issue like it was in Qatar. The circuit tests the balance of the cars and can break cars such as Sebastian Vettel's suspension, which broke during the 2019 Grand Prix as he was running over the curbs and the natural bumps in the circuit. The amount of different characteristics in the circuit means that setup will be vital. Do the teams focus on the corners and the downforce, or do they focus on getting better straight line speed efficiency with the high speed corners and some of the long straights on the circuit? Well, the teams will only once again have one practice session to figure out the setup that will be right for them, as it is yet another sprint race, meaning that qualifying will take place on Friday and the sprint race will be on Saturday, with of course the main Grand Prix being on the Sunday as usual. Due to the sprint format, I will be surprised if the teams manage to dial their cars fully into the circuit and perfect their setup. For the race at COTA, Pirelli have opted to go with the middle of the range tyres, meaning that the C2 will be the hard tyre, the C3 will be the medium tyre, and the C4 will be the soft compound of tyre. This is the same as last year, and last year there was a total of 36 pit stops as the vast majority of drivers opted to do a 2-stop strategy. There was a mixture of drivers using 1 set of mediums and 2 sets of hards, or they would use 2 sets of mediums and 1 set of the hard tyres. The soft compound did not feature in the race as the tyre was pretty much just a qualifying tyre. With this year's race, I anticipate that it will be another 2-stop race, especially as the teams don't have the circuit time to get the setup right to protect their tyres, but due to the sprint, I imagine they will use 1 set of mediums and 2 sets of the hard compound tyres. The Texas circuit is one of the best circuits on the calendar for overtaking as well, and last year you could see that as there was a total of 85 on-track overtakes, which made it the race with the most overtakes all year long. And to help with overtaking, the circuit features 2 DRS zones. One DRS zone is down the pit straight, and the other DRS zone is down the very long back straight. I anticipate that we will once again see plenty of overtakes in the Grand Prix, especially as tyre wear kicks in. The pole position lap time from last year's race was 1:34.356 by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, and the fastest lap from the Grand Prix was a 1:38.788 by George Russell in the Mercedes. It is somewhat surprising that the fastest lap was over 4 seconds off the qualifying lap time, especially with the race being a 2-stop strategy. This though does go to show just how much tyre wear can affect the drivers at Texas. With this weekend being a sprint race weekend, I expect that the fastest lap will be a little bit closer to the qualifying lap time, but the qualifying lap will be slower than last year, in my opinion anyway. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. I'm on my way to 5k subs, and I would really appreciate it if you help me get there. I've also set up a Patreon page, which you can find in the description below. Now, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, and let's start with McLaren. For McLaren, the Qatar Grand Prix saw them performing at their very best. They did not have to worry about tyre management, and this meant that we saw them finish within only a few seconds of Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri especially was able to take full advantage of the lack of tyre management, as this is still a weak spot for him. Lando Norris had great pace also, but a mistake in qualifying pretty much relegated him to finishing behind Piastri. Going into this race weekend, I once again expect McLaren will be strong. Sector 1 will be very strong for them. At Suzuka, McLaren were the team that were closest to Verstappen through the S section and in Sector 1, and also Sector 1 in Texas comprises of very similar S-bends. Sector 3 will also feature some fast corners that should suit their car nicely, and I would not be surprised if one of the two McLaren drivers can take the fight to Verstappen in qualifying. In the main Grand Prix, however, McLaren may struggle a little bit more with tyre wear. I anticipate that we will not see a repeat of Qatar, with McLaren being able to stay close to Verstappen. Instead, I can see them performing well against the rest of the field, but Verstappen will be out of reach as they will struggle with the relentless pace as tyre wear starts to kick in for them, as it does look like tyre wear is still an issue for them, especially Oscar Piastri. For Aston Martin, they are still clinging on to 4th place in the Constructors' Championship. However, it is starting to feel more and more like an inevitability that they are destined to finish in 5th place. They are at most teams a 5th fastest car, and they are essentially fighting with one arm tied behind their back, as only one driver seems to be able to score points. Stroll is really lacking now, and his lack of pace early on in the season is starting to bite back, as McLaren are now right behind Aston Martin. Going into the race at Texas, I can see Aston Martin once again fighting for 6th or 7th place with Fernando Alonso, and he will be able to pick up the scraps from Ferrari or Mercedes having some misfortunes. However, anything more than that will be very difficult to come by for them, and Lance Stroll, he may score a 10th place finish, but really I doubt he'll do any better than that. For Ferrari going into the United States Grand Prix, I think they are going to be the team that is hardest to rate. In Qatar, they really did not have strong pace as they were behind both McLaren and Mercedes drivers, and Leclerc really only had similar pace to Fernando Alonso. At Texas, though, I do think that Ferrari should perform much better, and they should be closer to McLaren, especially when it comes to race pace. Over bumps and through the higher speed sections, Ferrari are looking fairly strong, and with very long straights, then it should be possible that Ferrari can match McLaren potentially. Ferrari is still overall the faster car of the two when it comes to straight line performance, so I can see them clawing back some time. The question is though, with the lack of time to prepare, can Ferrari get the setup right, and can Carlos Sainz find himself comfortable? The thing that could hold Ferrari back is the tyre wear, and this is the same question as for McLaren. However, Ferrari have found themselves at times being much harder on tyres when it comes to them versus the Papaya team. For Sainz, after failing to start the Qatar Grand Prix also, it will be interesting to see if there are any further issues going into this weekend which could see him potentially taking a power unit grid penalty. He suffered from a fuel leak which in theory should not result in any power unit issues, but Ferrari may want to take some precautions. For Mercedes, the Qatar race was a huge missed opportunity as the two Mercedes drivers finally came together in a big way. We've seen them have minor incidents such as in qualifying at Barcelona and at the Japanese Grand Prix, but this time it resulted in Lewis Hamilton being knocked out of the race and Russell was forced to fight through the field, despite the fact that Mercedes were the second fastest team and potentially could have had both drivers on the podium, and that would have been perfect for them. However, it did not happen and they only gained a couple of points on Ferrari instead of a lot of points. Qatar was flat and smooth, which is perfect for Mercedes. The Circuit of the Americas, however, is anything but flat and smooth. The circuit features a lot of bumps and some big curves that they will have to be able to ride. With only one practice session to get the car right, then there is a good chance that Mercedes may struggle a lot more this weekend. And they are likely to be behind both Ferrari and McLaren, at least in qualifying trim in my opinion. Hamilton always gives it his all at this circuit, but the bumpy surface might make ride a lot more difficult for the Silver Arrows team. They struggled at Suzuka, and I can see them being the 4th fastest team this weekend. And finally for Red Bull, the Qatar race saw them come under the largest threat to victory all year long, barring the Singapore Grand Prix, where of course they didn't have the pace, as Verstappen only won the race by a few seconds from the McLaren pair. However, this was a bit of a one-off as Verstappen couldn't fully maximise Red Bull's biggest advantage, which is the tyre wear. Given how tyre wear can be at Texas, I anticipate that this race will be perfect for Max Verstappen and he will be untouchable. In qualifying, McLaren will likely be close to him, but I can see him having the edge, especially based on the Japanese Grand Prix. For Perez, however, I'm not sure what he needs to do to get things right. There's been a severe lack of points recently for him, and there is a growing sense that his time with Red Bull is slowly coming to an end. But right now, he just needs to focus on having a clean weekend, and from there, score some much needed points. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the United States Grand Prix? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Max Verstappen to score yet another pole position. But what about the race itself? Well, firstly, I think the top midfield driver will be Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. But what about the race itself? Well, in P5, I'm going to go for Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. P4 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P3 will be Charles Leclerc. P2 will be Lando Norris, and Max Verstappen will win the United States Grand Prix, and Carlos Sainz will not be in the top 5, but the reason for that is because he will have to take a power unit penalty, but that is just my opinion. The question is though, what do you guys think? In the comments down below, let me know, and as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.